It was a snowy, icy morning. My father was driving, my mother in the passenger seat, and I was in the back. I was about 8 at the time, so this was about 23 years ago, and I can still see it like it was yesterday. We had just reached the bottom of a pretty steep hill on the road. Our tail end would have been facing the top of the hill. We pulled into the turn lane at the base of the hill to make a left-hand turn into my mom's work where we were dropping her off. As we were stopped, waiting for traffic to clear, another car pulled up behind us, barely coming to a stop because of the icy conditions, but avoided making contact with the back end of our car. The speed limit would have been 45 or 55 miles per hour for good conditions, and then another vehicle attempted to stop behind the vehicle that was behind us. I heard my dad mention, as he looked in the rearview mirror, that the car was going too fast. In an instant, our car was about 50 yards ahead, pulled off to the right side of the road. We all looked back as the speeding car crashed into the car that was stopped behind us in the turn lane. The car that was behind us that got rear-ended was pushed into oncoming traffic. The driver of the vehicle that was behind us was killed instantly. To this day, my father, mother, nor I remembers our car moving out of the way. My dad swears he never touched the gas pedal, and we were at least 50 yards ahead of the accident in a matter of seconds. I still remember hearing the metal and glass breaking. We immediately had the conversation in the car that we didn't know how our car moved. When I was 16, I lived in a house where the previous owner had committed suicide. He offed himself in the unfinished basement a few years earlier. Unlike many of the stories that you hear here, my parents weren't particularly religious. My mother took us to church every now and again, but it never really stuck. She was a little strange though, or so I thought. But doesn't everyone think their mother is strange? Mine would constantly tell the story of seeing an old man that would sit on the end of her bed and watch her sleep. I never saw or even felt anything strange or different in that house, until that day. The basement was still unfinished when we moved in. You'd walk down the stairs from the kitchen and into a room that had a rock wall and a wood-burning stove. There was also a big old pool table that we would play on quite a bit. Just to the left of the room was the laundry. It was mostly just an empty room, but the washer and dryer were on one wall and wooden shelves made of 2x4s and plywood on the opposite wall. We used those shelves to store random stuff like boxes, books, and for some reason a basketball. So, one Saturday, I'm home alone as teenagers often are, and I decide I need to wash clothes so that I can go out and drag Main Street later that night to hopefully pick up a hottie. So I carried a basket of dirty clothes down the stairs, around the corner, and into the laundry room. I put the basket on the floor, opened the washing machine, and began loading the clothes when I hear the basketball fall off of the shelves behind me. I, of course, turn around and look at it, not really thinking much of it at this point. It just rolls slowly towards me. So I do what pretty much any teenage boy would do. I kicked it hard enough that it should have rolled across the floor, then bounced off of the shelves and made a horrible ruckus, but it didn't. Oh, it rolled, quickly, to the middle of the room. Then, inexplicably, it stopped, in the middle of the room, away from the shelves, away from the other walls, just there, in the middle of the room. It just stopped rolling and sat there. It was then that fear hit me, harder than any time before or since. I ran out of the laundry room, around the corner, up the stairs, and out the back door of the little yellow house. I jumped into my truck and drove away. I don't return to the house until late that night when my family was asleep. I snuck into the house, went to my bedroom, and I fell asleep. I had just moved into a new house. One day, I was downstairs when I heard what sounded like furniture moving around upstairs. I go up to investigate, but no sounds. Nothing is moved. I go back downstairs and it starts again. I go back up. Nothing. This went on for about an hour. I almost called the police because I was positive someone was in my home. I ended up calling someone and kept them on speakerphone while I searched the attic and any other place maybe an animal could be hiding, but I never found anything. Eventually, I gave up my search and went to bed. That night, I had a dream that I was driving to work in the rain and fog and crashed. Someone approached me and asked, "Are you ready to move on?" And I woke up. At the time, I was working mid-shift, so around 10 p.m. that same day, I get in the car on a foggy and rainy night and make my way to work without any issue. The building I worked in had security cameras all over, and it being so late, I was the only person coming in. When I get inside, the person I was relieving asked who I came in with. I was alone, but she swore someone followed me inside. It was a very unnerving 12 hours, to say the least. So, I guess a little context is in order. My girlfriend and I had been together about a year at the time, never had any big problems. We were both pretty relaxed people, never have had a big fight, never any trust issues, the whole shenanigan. So, one day, I was out in front of my apartment building smoking a cigarette. This was before we lived together. I had seen her the night before and had a nice dinner, gone out to the bar, then we headed back to my place, after which she took a taxi home. So I'm standing out in front of my apartment building. She pulls up in a taxi. I wasn't expecting her and was pleasantly surprised to see her. I put out my cigarette, smiled, and walked up to her, saying something like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" She scours at me and slaps me square across the jaw. Obviously, I'm dumbfounded and at a loss for words, so I just kind of look at her. She never said anything, just barged past me and into the building. I followed her up to my apartment, asking her what was happening the whole way. She goes into my apartment, grabs her bag and some of her stuff she left there, throws a few things at me, breaking a glass or two, knocking down a bunch of stuff on a shelf. She calls me a pig, that she knows everything, and that I've broken her heart. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, obviously, and she stops on her way out. When I touch her sleeve, she glares at me and slaps me. She tells me something like, "I hope I never see you again," and walks out. I followed her to the street and she got in her cab and drove off. The street was pretty empty. This was maybe 8 or 9 a.m. and I watched her drive off. At this point, I'm just at a loss for words, scared and sad. Then, as I'm watching the cab drive away, someone hugs me around my waist from behind. I turn around and it's her, in running clothes, and I went completely pale. She said, "Hi," in her usual happy-go-lucky tone, then noticed my look and said, "What's wrong?" I spun around. No taxi. It had literally driven away 5 seconds earlier. No way it could have turned around in that time, and all the lights were red. I didn't say anything to her, just ran upstairs. Her bag was gone. Things were still broken. My door still wide open. So then I told her. We were both monumentally confused. There's no way I could have mixed her up with someone else, and she's an only child. We had security check the cameras, and sure enough, me following a girl to my apartment. It's me following a girl to my apartment. The angles weren't great and the film wasn't great quality, but it was pretty easy to see my face. But hers was always hard to make out. It looked a hell of a lot like her, but never a clear shot. No way it was the same girl. It still creeps me out, and we don't really talk about it. To this day, I cannot explain what happened. I was watching TV with friends and we landed on some old 80s movie I used to watch over and over again, but I hadn't seen it in a long time. I had the dialogue memorized and it all instantly came back, and I knew what was going to be said next. Here's the freaky part. We changed channels and I kept trying to find something to watch. I noticed that everything we watched was the same. I knew every line of dialogue as if I was remembering it from having memorized it. These were all things I had never watched before. Here's the really freaky part. It started happening even when my friends were talking. An instant before they said anything, I knew word for word what they were going to say. The effect only lasted an hour or so, but it was really bizarre. This isn't exactly a creepy experience, but it was so vivid and distinct that I still think about it years later. I had a long, involved dream where I was a vendor in a fish market. I remember getting up early, dressing, doing a whole morning routine, going to get tea, heading out to the docks, buying fish, loading them in a cart and going to get ice, then haggling for ice, buying some less fresh fish while I was at it, then going to a market to my stall, setting up and selling fish all day. It was so real. I talked to friends, smoky, nasty cigarettes, haggled customers, ate lunch, had tea, and just lived through the day. At the end of the day, I cleaned up, counted my cash, paid the stall rent, went home, cooked some fish that I hadn't sold, and I ate some Reggie's and Vice that I traded for. I drank more tea, relaxed for a while, then I drew a hot bath, soaked and smoked some more cigarettes, then went to bed. The next morning, I woke up refreshed, ready to go down to the docks to buy a fresh catch. Except, I was in my house, next to my wife, truck parked outside, and it was Saturday. No work. My wife and I were getting geared up to go skiing in Oregon, and the car was already packed. Weird thing was, in my dream, I was single and a smoker, which I'm not in real life. And the whole long dream had been in fluent Chinese. The effortless kind of fluency that only comes from a lifetime of speaking it. Oh, and I had been Chinese. I'm a big hairy white guy, somewhat fluent in Spanish, and I know a little bit of Russian, but it was just weird. I've never worked in a fish market. I wondered who I was. I wonder what that was. I had just turned 22 and my parents had sold their house and purchased a place out in the country. On the property, there was a big shed not far from the house that I decided to turn into my place. Now, I felt kind of uncomfortable in the shed sometimes, but my dog kept me company, so it wasn't so bad. Anyway, I had been there maybe 2 weeks, and one night I'm on the computer, my dog asleep at my feet, and I needed to pee, so I get up and go outside to piss. It's a beautiful, clear night, and the stars were incredible. Next thing I hear, the shed door close behind me. I turn immediately and try to open it, but it won't budge. Now, from inside the shed, I can hear my dog start growling, quietly at first, then louder. Now he's barking and I'm panicking trying to get the door open. I must mention that I'm 6'5" and well built. I play sports, etc., but even ramming my full weight into the door won't open it, and I'm really panicking now as my dog's barks turn into whines, then whimpering, then silence, and with all my might I slam into the door and it finally opens. The light is off inside and it's pitch black. It won't turn back on, and I'm in complete darkness. Can't see my dog anywhere, and I stumble around trying to find a torch. Finally, I find it and pick it up and turn on my torch, and I wasn't prepared for what I'd see next. My dog had literally squashed itself into the furthest, darkest corner of the room, eyes closed, and it's shaking violently. I immediately moved towards him, and as soon as I got within reach of him, he leapt into my arms and wouldn't move. I picked him up, and I swear I've never ran so fast in my damn life. I never set foot in that shed ever again, and my dog wouldn't even go near that part of the property. I don't know what happened in that shed that night, but I'll never forget. About 4 or 5 years ago, I worked at Little Caesar's Pizza. Usually, I work inside on the pizzas, but we had just started up this Monday Madness deal where pizzas were only $4 on Monday, so we needed someone to advertise. I was a wild and weird metalhead, so I took up the position on Mondays of just going out there, throwing around a sign to get attention and bring people in for pizza. Not exactly glamorous, but I had fun. One day, while I was out there doing my thing, I see a van coming straight at me. It jumps the curb and slams into me, and I feel it crush me against the electric box controlling the streetlights. I see a quick flash as the traffic lights flick off, then black out. I gasp, and I'm still on the corner and nothing has happened. No van or anything. Well, I was a little shaken up, so I decided to pack it up and walk back to the store for a break. I walk no more than 15 feet away from the corner when I hear a crash. I look back, and a van just hopped the curb into the electric box, and I watch the traffic lights flick off. Needless to say, I took the day off, still thinking about that from time to time. I was catching a SkyTrain in one particular city about 15 minutes from where I get off. While I wait there, there's a woman with glazed eyes asking people for money. She came up to me, stopped briefly and asked, "Excuse me, could you spare some money? My brother's in the hospital and I'd like some money to buy him some flowers." That's rich, I thought. Drug addicts are getting more and more obvious with their lines. Here's $5. I gave it to her without even looking her in the face, convinced of her intentions. Anyway, my train pulls up and I get on. I look through the glass at her walking around asking others for money as the train pulls away. The train arrives at the station 15 minutes later and I walk down and out to the bus stop. There's only one bus the direction I'm going and just my luck, it's there, waiting when I get off the train. So on the bus I hop and wait for the bus driver to finish reading his paper before the doors close and we embark down the highway. About 5 or 10 minutes traveling, the driver pulls over for a routine stop. The doors open and to my complete astonishment, the woman from the SkyTrain walks into the bus. A dozen roses in hand. She looks me right in the eyes as she walks past to take her seat. How in the hell did she get there? I took the train before her. I watched her at the train stop from inside as we pulled away. I went over a river. I caught the first and only bus going this particular direction, and not only did she beat me there, she had time to go to a store and buy a dozen roses. To this day, I have no idea how this happened. I was a total idealist back in high school, so when choosing a college, I chose to go somewhere that none of my friends were attending so that I could strike out on my own in a finding myself sort of way. Well, I ended up making a few really close friends my first semester. I mean, these guys became like family to me in a matter of months. One day during winter break, one of those guys, my buddy Kimbo, had gone back home to visit friends and family, and on his return trip to our college, he hit a bad patch of ice and got into a car accident and was killed. It hurt like a son of a bitch for a long time, and I still think about him all the time. But anyway, a few weeks after Kimbo's accident, me and the rest of the guys were getting back from a party off campus, and we were standing outside our dorm building smoking a cig. I felt my phone vibrating, and when I pulled it out, I saw that I was getting a call from Kimbo's phone. Dumbfounded, I showed my friends the phone quickly and then answered. When I picked up, it just went directly to his voicemail, which played the same message it always had. It never happened again, and we never really talked about it, but for me, it was one of those someone's looking after me kind of moments. I hadn't been doing very well after his death, but seeing his name show up on my cell phone screen one final time made me feel a whole lot better for a while, and it really helped me get out of the slump I was in. I have no idea how his phone could have possibly called me, and I doubt I ever will. but this one glitch in the matrix that I'll forever be thankful for. Rest in peace, Kim, but feel free to call again. About a year ago, I had a terrible nightmare. It started off me waking up in a bed during a thunderstorm, as the room illuminated again and again from the flashes of lightning outside. I realized that the bed I was laying in wasn't mine. The head of the bed was against the wall the door was located on, and from my perspective, I couldn't tell if it was open or closed. That is, until I saw a face. At first, just the nose and jaw broke past the doorframe, but then an entire face slowly passed through the doorway. I tried to yell, "Who the hell are you? Where am I?" But it felt like I had lost my voice. No matter how hard I tried to scream, nothing came out, and this person continued to enter the room, looking dead ahead, away from me. Then, just as the person was completely into the room, their head snapped towards me and it locked eyes with mine. I tried to get out of the bed but felt completely paralyzed. The person started making their way to me, but with every step their body contorted in a way that would break a normal person's bones. Their neck snapped so the back of their head touched their back, their jaw layer flat on their chest. Their arms had broken at the shoulders and migrated to their back like wings. Just terrifying, and just before they reached me, I woke up. The next day I told my mom about it and went into great detail about the room. Turns out, it was almost an exact copy of my room when I was a baby. We moved out of that house when I was young, and I still don't remember what the inside of that house even looks like. It was a really weird experience. I was heading home with my dad. We stopped at a drive-thru. I started feeling more and more anxious for no reason, to the point where it made me lightheaded and sick to my stomach. We had to wait a little bit ahead, because they gave us the wrong order. So I sit there feeling like shit, and it suddenly comes to me, an urge to call my brother. He was trying to call us. He was in a car accident. No one died. Some got seriously bruised, he was only shaken. I told him to shut up and get as far away from the car as possible. He didn't understand but followed through, trying to call some of his buddies, and I could hear them calling him a wuss, him giving up and getting far, and then a loud noise, and people shouting. After the whole thing was over, he told me what happened. His drunk friend tried to impress some girls in the car, hit the gas, drifted, and hit the bottom of the car on some rocks, completely screwing with the engine. They stood near the car, the driver still inside trying to turn the engine back on. The hood burst in flames and the car started to burn fast. The driver managed to get away but got severely injured. Some of the guys and girls who stood around were hurt and burned as well, but not as bad as the driver. My brother was the only one with light bruises from the whole thing. He told me that when I ordered him to get away from the car, he was in front of it, inches from the hood. I never experienced anything like this before or after, just this once. It's just a weird memory. I don't remember what I was thinking. I remember it like I was watching a movie and seeing myself and everything from an outside angle. I was working in a family medicine clinic on my clinical rotations when a patient came in to talk about his high blood pressure. Seems pretty anxious, so I started just talking to him to put him at ease a bit, and after a while, he tells me that he senses he can trust me and asks whether I'd like to talk to him about why his body is failing. He tells me in a pretty intense but otherwise unremarkable way that he descends from a long line of individuals who identify and expel demons in the human world from inside people and places. He's been doing this for many years, but it takes a powerful physical toll on him. He states that he can see demons wherever they reside and can also see inside the hearts and minds of individuals he comes in contact with. He tells me that there are 3 angels that travel with him and describes them in great detail, tells me where in the room they are right now. He named them, but I don't honestly remember the names. He talks about how his son is also given this power, but that he's still young and learning. The patient is extremely concerned about his high blood pressure and kidney function, as he is afraid he'll die before he's able to fully train his son to accept his responsibility, and is devastated at the thought of not being able to help others with the demons if he's in bad health, as this is his life's purpose and he has taken the spiritual pain and suffering of the world upon himself. He has tears in his eyes as he's saying this. I tell him that given what he's told me, it's understandable that he's worried, that I myself felt a calling toward medicine and would be devastated as well if I felt that there was something that could keep me from doing that. That we can work together to get his blood pressure under control, trying to address his health concerns and treat him with respect without validating what sounds like delusions and hallucinations or making him feel rejected. After we start making a plan, the patient says that he can see into my heart, and that I'm a good person and I am going to help a lot of people, and that I need protection. He says he's assigning me an angel and starts praying, wherein he correctly identifies me as both being married and that my husband and I are in a long-distance relationship while he gets his PhD. He states that my grandmother is in the room with us and relays things that she is saying, which happen to be phrases that she used to say very often when she was alive. He says that my grandmother thinks I look so professional in my white coat, and that she was sorry that she never got to see me in but before she died, but that I'm making her and my grandfather very proud. My grandmother died 2 years ago and never saw me in my white coat. The patient finishes up by saying that I will see the angel that night, and correctly describes the layout of my apartment while telling me exactly where I'm going to see the angel. At that point, I was pretty freaked out, but I have a pretty strong poker face with patients, so I'm not showing it. Still, the patient leans towards me and says, "You know it's real now, don't you?" He asks me if I want to see the angels in the room. I decline. That night, I was at home, still pretty freaked out and honestly feeling kind of nervous. I'm not religious in any way and don't believe in any of that, angels, demons, etc. Still, that night, while I was standing in my room getting ready for bed, I could have sworn I saw someone walk through my bedroom kind of behind me out of the corner of my eye. I whipped around and kind of give out a yell of terror, but there was no one there. The patient had told me that I would see the angel walk by while I was in my bedroom, so maybe it was just me being conditioned to see it, being nervous and everything, who knows. When I started studying psychology back in high school, I became interested in those TV psychics and mediums, and the art of cold reading and making educated guesses. I absolutely hated them, which I guess fuels my studying about them. I like to think that I can spot a cold reader and can separate my emotions enough while working to keep a rational mind at all times. The patient wasn't cold reading, and if he was guessing, he was amazing at it and took some risks that I don't think even the professionals would do. My husband was pretty casual about the whole thing. He thought it was weird and creepy just like I did, but he said, "Well dear, if he was wrong, then you just helped a mentally ill patient control their blood pressure. If he was right, then we have everything to believe is wrong and we're now protected by an angel. It's kind of a win-win." So I guess we'll just see it that way? It does still make me nervous though, as I don't want to believe in demons lurking the earth hunting for people to possess and torture. I'm not sure what this says about angels and demons, but this has to be one of the weirdest experiences of my life.